The great hall of the Velhari Palace stretched high above Princess Alira's head. Crystal pillars reached toward the domed ceiling, where artificial stars glowed in patterns that told the history of her people. She had walked these halls since childhood. Today might be the last time. The Council of Matriarchs sat in their elevated seats, 12 ancient women whose decisions shaped the fate of 200 star systems. Their silver robes caught the light as they whispered among themselves. Alira stood alone in the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back to hide their shaking. The medical reports are clear, Matriarch Velnus said. Her voice echoed in the vast space. Princess Alira of House Velthrin cannot bear children. The genetic flaw is complete and cannot be corrected. Alira kept her face blank. She had known this moment was coming for 3 months, since the doctors had delivered their impossible diagnosis. In Velhari society, such things did not happen. Their people had mastered genetics thousands of years ago. Every child was born perfect, healthy, capable of continuing the bloodline. Except her. Lord Crethus has withdrawn his offer of marriage, another matriarch continued. As have the other suitors. The princess cannot fulfill her duty to the empire. Duty. That word had defined Alira's entire life. Her duty to marry well, to produce heirs with strong genetic traits, to strengthen the alliances between the great houses. Without the ability to have children, she had no duty. Without duty, she had no purpose. Without purpose, she was nothing. What is the council's decision? Alira asked. Her voice came out steady, which surprised her. The matriarchs exchanged glances. Matriarch Velnus spoke again. You will retain your title, but you are removed from succession. You may not attend court functions or represent House Velthrin in any official capacity. Your chambers will be relocated to the outer palace. Number Sef. Exile in everything but name. Alira bowed her head. I understand. As she left the hall, she could feel eyes on her from every corner. Word had already spread through the palace. The perfect princess was broken. The whispers followed her like shadows. Her younger sister Mayara waited in the corridor. Unlike Alira's silver-white skin, Mayara's had the deep blue tint of their mother's bloodline. She was beautiful, talented, and most importantly, fertile. Everything Alira was supposed to be. I'm sorry, Miata said quietly. Don't be. This isn't your fault. Father wants to see you. He's in the observation tower. Alira found her father standing before the great window that looked out over the capital city. Spires of crystal and metal stretched toward the sky, connected by bridges of light. Ships moved between the towers like schools of fish. It was beautiful, and suddenly it felt very far away from her. Alira, her father said without turning. The council was merciful. They could have stripped your title entirely. Yes, father. This situation is unfortunate. We will manage the political consequences. House Velthrin will survive. He didn't ask how she felt. He didn't offer comfort. To him, she was already a closed chapter, a problem to be managed. Alira left without another word. The outer palace was quieter than the main residence. Smaller windows, simpler decorations, fewer servants. Alira spent her days in her new chambers, reading old texts and trying to imagine what came next. Several times she considered leaving the planet entirely. But where would she go? The Velhari Empire was her entire world. 3 weeks later, a message arrived from the human embassy. They needed a translator for their diplomatic staff. The pay was modest, the work was beneath a princess, and it was the only offer she received. Alira accepted. The humans were strange. They were shorter than Velhari, with soft skin that came in dozens of shades. Their hair grew wild in colors that had no genetic purpose. They laughed too loud and talked with their hands and seemed to care very little about proper protocol. Ambassador Taeyong interviewed her personally. He was an older man with gray hair and kind eyes. Your language skills are impressive, he said, reviewing her credentials. But I need to know you'll be comfortable working with humans. Some of your people find us primitive. I have nowhere else to go, Alira said honestly. I will work hard. He studied her for a moment, then smiled. Then welcome to the team. Fair warning. We're a bit chaotic compared to Velhari standards. He wasn't wrong. The human embassy was constantly busy, with people rushing between meetings and talking over each other and eating meals at their desks. But no one whispered about her. No one looked at her with pity. They were simply too busy to care about her personal tragedy. Alira translated documents, attended diplomatic functions, and slowly began to feel useful again. The work was challenging in ways she hadn't expected. Humans used metaphors that made no sense, idioms that didn't translate, and humor that often confused her. But she learned. One evening, Ambassador Taeyang asked her to help prepare for the Festival of Convergence, a celebration that brought together humans and Velhari in neutral territory. We need someone who understands both cultures, he explained. You'd be perfect. I'm not certain the Velhari Council would want me representing anything, Alira said carefully. You're not representing them. You're representing yourself. Sometimes that's more important. The festival was held on an orbital station between Earth's fleet and the Velhari core worlds. Alira arrived with the human delegation, feeling out of place among the colorful banners and music and laughter. This was nothing like formal Velhari ceremonies, with their precise protocols and dignified silence. She walked through the pavilions, observing the crowds. Humans mingled with Velhari, though both groups seemed cautious. Near the food vendors, she saw Velhari nobles she recognized from court. They saw her too, and turned away. Alira climbed the crystalline steps toward the outer pavilions, where fewer people gathered. She needed air, space, silence, but her foot caught on her robe, and suddenly she was falling. The steps rushing up to meet her. Strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. Whoa, careful there, a voice said, in slightly accented Velhari. Alira looked up into the face of a human man. He had dark eyes, short dark hair, and wore a military uniform with medical insignia. His grip was steady, as he helped her regain her footing. Are you all right? He asked, genuine concern in his voice. Yes, thank you, Alira said, smoothing her robe. That was careless of me. These steps are slippery. I saw 2 other people nearly fall. I'm Jiho, by the way. Sergeant Jiho Kang, combat medic. I'm with the security detail. Alira. She didn't offer her title. It felt meaningless here. Jiho smiled. Nice to meet you. First time at one of these festivals? Yes. You? Second time. Last year, I mostly stood in corners looking intimidating. This year, I'm trying to actually experience it. He glanced around. Though, I'll admit, I'm not great at parties. Something about his awkward honesty made Alira smile for the first time in months. Neither am I. Want to be not great at parties together? I found a quieter spot, with a pretty good view of the stars. Alira hesitated. Every rule of protocol said she should politely decline, but protocol had abandoned her long ago. Yes, she said. I'd like that. They walked together to the observation deck, where the stars spread out like diamonds on black silk. And for the first time since her diagnosis, Alira felt like perhaps she wasn't completely invisible. After all, Jiho led Alira to a quiet corner of the observation deck, where the crowd noise faded to a distant hum. Through the transparent walls, stars stretched in every direction. Ships moved between them like bright insects, their running lights blinking in the darkness. Better than the party? Jiho said, leaning against the railing. Don't get me wrong, I appreciate the cultural exchange and all that, but I'm more of a quiet observation kind of guy. I understand that feeling, Alira said. She stood beside him, careful to maintain proper distance. The crowds can be overwhelming. You're Velhari, right? I'm still learning to tell the different houses apart. The skin tones mean something. I know that much. Silver white means House Velthrin. Blue tones are House Kareth, gold is House Marin. Alira gestured to her own pale skin. Though, I suppose it doesn't matter much anymore. Jiho glanced at her. Why wouldn't it matter? She hadn't meant to say that. But something about this human soldier made her feel like she could speak freely. I'm not really part of the house structure anymore. I work at your embassy now. Arlo did. SK2. Oh, you're the new translator everyone's been talking about. They say you're brilliant. Ambassador Taeyang mentioned you saved a trade negotiation last week because you caught a word that changed the entire meaning. I simply did my job. That's more than most people manage. Jiho smiled. I mostly just stand around and occasionally patch people up. Not exactly heroic. You were a combat medic? That sounds very heroic. Jiho laughed, but there was something sad in it. Heroic is a nice word for it. Mostly it meant trying to save people who couldn't be saved. The border wars weren't anyone's finest moment. He shook his head. Sorry. That got dark fast. Tell me about Velhari instead. What's your planet like? They talked for hours. Alira described the crystal forests of her homeworld, where trees grew with transparent bark that caught sunlight in rainbow patterns. Jiho told her about Earth, about oceans and mountains, and his grandmother's garden, where she grew vegetables from seeds her mother had saved. My grandmother always said the best things come from dirt and patience, Jiho said. She'd spend hours with her plants, talking to them. My sister Nari and I thought she was crazy. But everything she grew tasted better than anything from the stores. You have a sister? Yeah, Nari. She's actually here somewhere, probably charming some diplomat. She's better at this stuff than me. Much more social. He paused. We're adopted, actually. Both of us. The monsoon wars left a lot of orphans. My parents took us in when I was 5, and Nari was 3. Adopted? Alira repeated the word carefully. She knew the concept, but it was rare among Velhari. Yeah, you know. When someone chooses to raise a child that isn't biologically theirs, becomes their family anyway. Jiho studied her expression. Is that weird? In Velhari culture, it's not common. Family lines are very important to us. Blood connections define everything. Huh. For humans, family is more about who shows up for you, who loves you. Biology is just biology. He shrugged. My parents are my parents, even though we don't share DNA. They chose me. Alira felt something shift in her chest, choice mattering more than biology. What a strange, impossible idea. They met again 3 days later at the embassy. Jiho came in for a routine meeting and found Alira working late in the translation department. He had coffee from Earth, real coffee that smelled rich and dark. Thought you might need this, he said, offering her a cup. Taeyang mentioned you've been here since dawn. Thank you. Alira took the cup carefully. The warmth felt good against her hands. I have 15 documents due tomorrow. Mind if I keep you company? I'm supposed to review medical supply requisitions, which is exactly as boring as it sounds. He pulled up a chair. They worked in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by questions. Jiho asked about Velhari grammar. Alira asked about human medical techniques. Conversation flowed naturally between them, easier than breathing. Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern. Jiho would find excuses to visit the translation department. Alira would take her breaks when he was available. They shared meals in the embassy cafeteria, walked in the rooftop garden, talked about everything and nothing. Jiho told her about the soldiers he couldn't save, the nightmares that still woke him sometimes. Alira told him about failing her family, about feeling broken in a society that didn't allow imperfection. He listened without judgment. She listened without pity. They understood each other, in ways that surprised them both. One evening, Jiho brought a small plant to her office. It was nothing fancy, just a green thing in a clay pot. but his face was bright with excitement. "It's called a peace lily," he said. "From Earth. They're tough, easy to care for. I thought you might like having something living in here. The fluorescent lights are depressing." And Alira touched the plant's leaves gently. "It's beautiful. Thank you. Fair warning, I'm told they're dramatic. If you forget to water them, they collapse like they're dying. But give them water, and they bounce right back. Resilient little things." She placed the plant on her desk, where she could see it while working. That night, she stayed late again. But the office felt less lonely with the peace lily there. 3 months after they met, Jiho asked her to dinner. Not in the cafeteria, but at a small restaurant in the human quarter, where Earth food was served. Alira had never eaten Earth cuisine before. The flavors were bold, spicy, complex in ways Velhari food wasn't. "This is called kimchi," Jiho explained, pointing to the red fermented vegetables. "It's from Korea, where my grandmother was from, or where her ancestors were from. We've been in space so long. Sometimes Earth feels more like a story than a real place." Alira tried the kimchi. The spice made her eyes water. But there was something addictive about it. "It's strong. Yeah, Korean food doesn't do subtle." He laughed. "My grandmother used to say food should make you feel something, not just fill your stomach." "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. I miss her." Jiho's expression grew serious. "Can I ask you something? You don't have to answer if it's too personal." "All right. Why did you leave the palace?" "Everyone says you're royalty, but you never talk about it." Alira set down her utensils. She had known this question would come eventually. "I can't have children," she said simply. "In Velhari culture, that makes me worthless, especially for royalty. Our entire purpose is to continue the bloodline, to produce the next generation. Without that ability, I have no place in society." Jiho was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Alira looked up, shocked. "I'm sorry? Not you. The system. The idea that a person's worth is just about whether they can reproduce. That's insane." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You're brilliant. You speak 6 languages. You prevented a trade war last month with quick thinking. You're kind and funny, and you actually listen when people talk. But none of that matters? Because of biology? That's how my people see it. Then your people are wrong." Jiho said it like it was the simplest fact in the universe. "You're not broken, Alira. The system that judges you is broken." No one had ever said anything like that to her. Not her family, not the council, not anyone. Alira felt tears burning in her eyes and blinked them back. "That's not how things work in the Empire. Maybe the Empire needs to change. It's not that simple." "I know." Jiho reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was bold by Velhari standards, but Alira didn't pull away. "But you shouldn't have to carry that shame. It's not yours to carry." They walked back to the embassy together through streets lit by bioluminescent panels. The city was quiet at this hour. Peaceful. Jiho walked close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Thank you," Alira said as they reached the entrance. "For dinner. For listening." "Any time," Jiho smiled. "Same time next week? I'd like that." As Alira returned to her small apartment in the embassy building, she realized something had shifted. For months, she had felt like she was just surviving, just getting through each day. But tonight, for the first time since her diagnosis, she had felt alive. Like maybe there was more to life than duty and bloodlines. Like maybe she could be enough, just as she was. The peace lily on her desk had grown new leaves. She watered it carefully and smiled. The relationship between Earth and the Velhari Empire was getting worse. Alira saw it in every document she translated, every tense meeting she attended. The Velhari Council viewed human values as dangerous, a threat to their carefully ordered society. Humans, with their chaotic emotions and loose family structures, represented everything the Empire had spent millennia engineering away. Ambassador Taeyang called an emergency meeting. His staff gathered in the conference room. Faces worried. Alira sat in the back, her translation tablet ready. "The situation is critical," Taeyang said, his voice heavy. "The Velhari Council has issued an ultimatum. Either we demonstrate serious commitment to their values, or they'll close our embassy and end diplomatic relations. If that happens, trade stops. The colonies on the border will suffer, and there's a real chance of military conflict." The room erupted in worried chatter. Jiho sat across from Alira, his jaw tight. Their eyes met, and she saw the same fear she felt reflected in his face. If the embassy closed, what would happen to her? Where would she go? After the meeting, Jiho found her on the roof garden. The artificial sky showed Earth's sunset, painted in oranges and purples. He had been coming here often lately, usually when he needed to think. "This is bad," he said, standing beside her at the railing. "Yes. You'll lose your job, your home here. I know." Alira kept her voice steady. "I've been preparing for this possibility. Perhaps I can find work on one of the neutral trade stations. Or you could stay." Jiho turned to face her. His hands were shaking slightly. "There's a way you could stay. If you wanted to." "What do you mean?" Jiho took a deep breath. "Marry me." Alira stared at him. "That's not funny. I'm not joking." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple ring, silver with a small blue stone. "I know this is crazy. I know the timing is terrible. But I've been thinking about this for months, and recent events just made me realize I can't wait any longer. Jiho, you can't possibly want to marry me. I'm Velhari. I'm disgraced. I can't give you children. I don't care about any of that." He stepped closer. "I care about you. About how you make me laugh. About your terrible jokes. About translation errors. About the way you take care of that peace lily like it's the most important thing in the world. About how you're brave enough to keep going when everything fell apart. But children. I don't need biological children to have a family. I'm adopted, remember? My parents chose me. If we want kids someday, we can adopt too. There are so many children in the border zones who need homes. Or we cannot have children at all. It's our choice." He took her hand. "I'm not asking you to give me heirs or continue a bloodline. I'm asking you to be my partner. To build a life together. To share the boring days and the exciting ones. That's what marriage means to humans." Alira felt tears running down her face. "Your career, your family, they'll hate this decision. My sister Nari will love you. My parents taught me to follow my heart. As for my career, well, I'll figure it out." He smiled. "We can see the ground. We have a Brang. We have Bart. We can see the ground. It is Nari on side. We have a Binig WA. We can see the ground. We have a Binig ground. I'm pretty good at starting over. The scandal will be enormous. The Velhari Council will be furious that a human married a princess. Even a disgraced one. Let them be furious. Maybe it's time someone challenged their rules. This is insane, probably. But the best things usually are." Jiho squeezed her hand. "You don't have to answer right now. Think about it. But know that I mean every word. I want to marry you, Alira. Not because it's practical or political. Because I love you." Alira looked at this human soldier who had somehow seen her worth when her own people declared her worthless. Who offered her a future when she thought she had none. Who made her feel alive again. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes. I'll marry you." The wedding was small and happened quickly. Ambassador Taeyang performed the ceremony in the embassy garden, under Earth laws, since Velhari law wouldn't recognize their union. Jiho's unit attended, along with a few embassy staff. Nari flew in from the outer colonies, and she hugged Alira so hard it hurt in the best way. "Welcome to the family," Nari said, grinning. I always wanted a sister I could actually talk to about books and politics. Jiho just grunts at me. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate protocols or genetic compatibility tests or political negotiations. Just two people promising to stand by each other. Alira wore a blue dress that Nari had helped her pick out. Jiho wore his dress uniform. They exchanged rings and promises, and when he kissed her, everyone cheered. For one perfect day, Alira forgot about the Empire and the Council and everything she'd lost. She was just a woman, marrying the man she loved. The backlash came swiftly. The Velhari Council issued a formal statement calling the marriage a disgrace. They stripped Alira of her remaining titles and declared her an exile. Any Velhari citizen who associated with her would face consequences. The news spread across the Empire, and the reactions were brutal. On human networks, the response was different. The story of the soldier who married the disgraced princess captured hearts across Earth's colonies. Artists created paintings of their wedding. Musicians wrote songs. It became a symbol of love, defying unjust systems. But symbols don't pay bills or provide safety. Jiho's military pension was frozen, while Earth's government investigated whether his marriage compromised security. Conservative politicians called him a traitor. Progressive ones defended him. The debate raged, and in the middle of it, Jiho and Alira tried to build a life. Then came the first assassination attempt. They were walking through the market district when Alira felt something wrong. Years of court training had taught her to read tension in a crowd. She grabbed Jiho's arm just as a Velhari man lunged forward, blade in hand. Jiho's combat reflexes kicked in. He blocked the strike, disarmed the attacker, and pinned him to the ground in seconds. Security arrived quickly, taking the man away. He shouted about genetic traitors and human contamination until they dragged him out of sight. "Are you hurt?" Jiho asked, checking Alira over carefully. "No, but you are." Blood dripped from a cut on his arm, just a scratch. He smiled, but she could see the fear in his eyes. "Let's go home." That night, they sat in their small apartment above the embassy. The peace lily had grown large now, taking up half of Alira's desk. Jiho bandaged his arm, while Alira made tea, her hands shaking. "We can't stay here," she said quietly. "Where would we go?" "There's a colony world, New Jeju. It's a human settlement, but they welcome other species. The frontier is more flexible about these things." She sat beside him. "We could start over there, away from Earth politics and Empire politics. Just us." Jiho considered this. "I could work as a medic. They always need medical staff on frontier colonies. And I could teach. They need educators for mixed species children. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." Jiho kissed her forehead. "When do we leave?" They spent 2 weeks preparing. Nari helped them arrange transport, using her diplomatic connections. Ambassador Taeyang wrote letters of recommendation. Jiho's unit held a farewell party that turned into a night of stories and laughter and promises to stay in touch. On their last night, Alira stood in the embassy garden one final time. The artificial stars above showed constellations from Earth, patterns that had guided humans across oceans before they ever reached space. She thought about how far she'd come from the palace halls, how much she'd lost and gained. Jiho found her there, 2 packed bags at his feet. "Ready?" "Ready." They boarded the transport ship as the sun rose. Through the viewport, Alira watched the embassy grow smaller, then disappear. The planet fell away. The stars opened up before them, full of possibility. Jiho slept with his head on her shoulder as they jumped through the gate toward New Jeju. Alira stayed awake, watching the stars stream past. She thought about the Velhari, saying, "Blood defines destiny." But her blood had condemned her to nothing, and her choices had given her everything. Perhaps humans were right after all. Perhaps family was something you chose, something you built. Perhaps worth came from who you were, not what you could produce. The ship sailed on through the darkness. carrying them toward an uncertain future. But for the first time in her life, Alira wasn't afraid of uncertainty. She had Jiho. She had love. She had herself. That was enough. New Jeju was nothing like the gleaming cities of the Velhari Empire or the organized colonies of Earth. It was a frontier world, rough around the edges, where buildings were practical rather than beautiful. The sky was slightly green during the day, and 2 small moons rose at night. The air smelled different here, like copper and growing things. The spaceport was crowded with beings from a dozen species. Humans, yes, but also Krell traders with their 3 arms, Dothani merchants, whose skin changed color with their moods, and a few other Velhari, who looked at Alira with either pity or contempt. She kept her eyes forward and her hand in Jiho's. They found an apartment in the mixed district, where no single species dominated. 2 rooms, basic furniture, and a window that overlooked a market street. It was smaller than Alira's closet had been in the palace. It felt like home. Jiho started work at the colony hospital the next day. The medical director, a human woman named Dr. Yuna, didn't care about scandal or politics. She cared that Jiho had combat medical training and wasn't squeamish. "We get everything here," Yuna explained, showing him around the busy emergency department. Mining accidents, construction injuries, illnesses we've never seen because someone's biology doesn't match our databases. You'll learn fast or you'll fail. No in between. Jiho thrived. The work was hard and constant, but it was real. He saved lives without committees or politics getting in the way. He came home exhausted, but satisfied. Alira had a harder time. She applied to teach at the colony's school, but the director was hesitant. "We've never had a Velhari teacher before," he said, not unkindly. "The parents might be uncomfortable. I have extensive education in literature, history, and languages," Alira said, keeping her voice steady. "I can teach children to communicate across cultures. Let me think about it." She left disappointed but not defeated. The next day, she created a small language class in their apartment, offering free lessons to anyone who wanted to learn Velhari or improve their human languages. 3 students came the first week. By the 3rd week, she had 15. One student was a young human girl named Hana, whose parents worked at the mining facility. "I want to learn Velhari because the kids at school say mean things about Velhari people," Hana explained. "I figure, if I learn their language, I can understand them better. Maybe they're not so different." Alira felt her heart warm. "That's very wise, Hana." The classes grew. Adults came after work shifts. Children came after school. Alira taught in their living room, sitting on cushions on the floor because they didn't have enough chairs. She loved it. This was teaching without politics, learning without judgment, just people trying to understand each other. But peace didn't last. 4 months after they arrived, Jiho came home with blood on his shirt and fear in his eyes. There was an incident at the hospital. A Velhari man came in with a treatable infection. When he found out I was the one treating him, he refused care. Said he'd rather die than be touched by the human who corrupted a princess. Did he? He survived. Yuna treated him herself. But he filed a complaint with the Velhari embassy on the capital world. They're demanding my medical license be reviewed. Jiho sat heavily on their worn couch. "It doesn't matter where we go. They won't let us forget." Jiho 7. Alira sat beside him, taking his hand. "We'll fight it. I'm tired of fighting. Then we'll rest, and then we'll fight again." She kissed his cheek. "That's what partners do." The license review took months. During that time, Jiho worked under supervision, which humiliated him. But he kept working. He had patients who depended on him, like old Minho, who came in every week for dialysis and told terrible jokes, or young Junho, who had broken his arm 3 times doing stunts to impress girls, and treated Jiho like a hero. Alira's language school continued growing. The colony director finally offered her an official teaching position. She accepted, and suddenly, She had a real classroom, a salary, and 30 students of mixed species who called her Teacher Alira. They were building something. Slowly, carefully, but real. Then 3 Velhari children arrived at the refugee center. The border conflicts had been growing worse. Velhari factions that opposed the council's strict genetic laws were fighting back. Entire settlements were destroyed. These 3 children, siblings aged 8, 6, and 4, had watched their parents die in an attack. The refugee center couldn't place them. Velhari law said they should go to the Empire for placement with relatives. But the children's parents had been reformers, outcasts. There were no relatives who would take them. Alira visited the center after one of her students mentioned the children. She found them sitting together on a single bed, the oldest boy with his arms around his younger brother and sister. They looked up when she entered, eyes wide with hope and fear. "Hello," she said in Velhari. "My name is Alira. You're the traitor princess," the oldest boy said. "The one who married the human." "Yes, I'm also a teacher. I heard you need help." The girl, middle child, looked at her brother. "Can we trust her?" Mama said. "The Empire lies about everything. Your mama was right about many things." Alira sat on the floor so she was at their level. "I can't promise I have all the answers, but I promise I'll listen. What are your names?" "I'm Hyun. This is Sora and Doyun." The boy's voice wavered. "We don't have anywhere to go." Alira felt something shift in her chest. She thought of Jiho's story about being adopted, about family being choice. She thought about the empty second bedroom in their apartment. She thought about how these children looked, lost and afraid and trying to be brave. "Would you like to come home with me?" she asked. "Just for tonight. You can meet my husband. We have extra beds, and I make decent breakfast." The children looked at each other. Sora nodded. Doyun, the youngest, reached for Alira's hand. That night, Jiho came home to find 3 Velhari children eating dinner at their small table. Alira was serving them soup while telling a story that made them giggle. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. "Jiho," Alira said, seeing him. "These are Hyun, Sora, and Doyun. They're staying with us tonight. Children, this is my husband." Hyun looked up at Jiho suspiciously. "Are you nice?" "I try to be," Jiho said, setting down his bag. "Are you hungry?" "I stopped for bread on the way home." By the end of the week, the children were still there. By the end of the month, Alira and Jiho were signing foster care papers. By the end of the year, they were a family. It was chaos. Hyun had nightmares and sometimes woke screaming. Sora refused to speak for weeks at a time. Doyun clung to Alira constantly, afraid she would disappear. They broke things and fought with each other, and needed so much patience. But slowly, they healed. Hyun started smiling. Sora began talking again, her voice soft, but growing stronger. Doyun learned he could venture to the other room, and Alira would still be there when he came back. During this time, Alira was helping at Jiho's hospital, translating for Velhari patients. She noticed something strange in the medical records. Velhari patients were developing autoimmune disorders at alarming rates. Conditions that were rare even a decade ago were now common. She mentioned it to Yuna, who pulled up system-wide data. The pattern was clear. Velhari across all colonies were getting sicker. Their perfect immune systems were turning against them. "It's like their bodies are too refined," Yuna said, studying the charts. "Too specialized. When they encounter new pathogens or stress factors, they can't adapt." Alira thought about the Council's obsession with genetic perfection, about eliminating every flaw, every variation. What if perfection had made them fragile? She spent months researching, pulling medical papers and genetic studies. She worked late into the night while Jiho put the children to bed. The picture that emerged was damning. The Velhari had engineered themselves into a corner. By eliminating genetic diversity, they'd removed their ability to adapt. The perfect immune systems couldn't handle imperfection. The carefully designed bodies couldn't cope with change. Ironically, the outcasts, the ones with flawed genetics like Alira herself, showed more resistance to the new disorders. The imperfections that made them worthless to the Council were the variations that kept them healthy. "I need to publish this," Alira told Jiho one night. "But if I do, the Council will know I'm behind it. It could be dangerous. It could also save lives," Jiho said. Alira looked at their small home, at Hyun doing homework at the table, at Sora reading a book in the corner, at Doyun asleep with his head on Jiho's lap, at the life they'd built from nothing. "I want to help," she said. Even if they hate me for it, she published her research anonymously through human scientific channels. But everyone knew who had written it. There was only one Velhari geneticist married to a human, living on New Jeju, with the expertise and courage to challenge the Council. The responses were immediate and divided. Some Velhari scientists called her a liar. Others quietly began their own investigations and found the same patterns. Human scientists praised her work. Reformist groups on the border worlds used her research to argue for changing genetic policies. And in the Velhari Empire, the Council watched and said nothing. But Alira knew silence could be more dangerous than rage. The plague started small. A few cases on the Velhari homeworld, patients with high fevers and respiratory failure. Within weeks, it spread to 6 core planets. Within months, the Velhari Empire faced the worst health crisis in its recorded history. The disease targeted their engineered immune systems specifically. It exploited the very perfection that the Velhari had spent millennia creating. Mortality rates climbed. Hospitals overflowed. The Council, for the first time in generations, looked desperate. Alira watched the news reports with growing horror. The death toll climbed daily. Among the dead were names she recognized: childhood friends, former teachers, people who had turned away from her when she was declared infertile, yes, but still people she had known. Jiho found her crying in their bedroom, watching casualty numbers scroll across the screen. He sat beside her without a word, just held her hand. "I could help," she whispered. "My research showed that genetic diversity provides resistance. The outcasts, the ones with imperfect genes, they're surviving at higher rates. What are you thinking? The Council won't listen to me. I'm an exile and a traitor, but they might listen to human medical teams. If I went with them, provided translation and genetic expertise." She looked at him. "It would mean going back. To the homeworld. To the place that rejected me. Do you want to go?" Alira thought about it. Part of her wanted to let the Empire face the consequences of its own policies. They had declared her worthless, after all. But she thought about the children in hospitals, innocent of the Council's decisions. She thought about doctors trying to save patients with incomplete information. "Yes," she said. "I want to help. But I can't leave you. And the children. Then we'll all go." Jiho said it like it was obvious. "Well, maybe not the kids. They can stay with Nari. But I'm a medic. This is what I do. And you're my wife. Where you go, I go." The Human Coalition assembled a medical response team within days. 30 doctors, nurses, and medical specialists. Dr. Yuna led the team. Jiho signed up immediately, his license review mysteriously resolved in light of the crisis, and Alira joined as both translator and genetic consultant. The Velhari Council, facing catastrophe, agreed to accept human aid. They had no choice. Their own doctors were dying alongside their patients. The journey to the Velhari homeworld took 2 weeks through the fastest gates. Alira stood at the viewport as her birth planet came into view. The crystal cities still gleamed, but she could see dark sections where power had failed. Even from space, the Empire looked sick. They landed at the capital's main spaceport. A Velhari medical official met them, his face covered by a protective mask. "The Council thanks Earth for its assistance," he said formally. "You will be escorted to the primary medical facility." The hospital was chaos. Patients filled every bed, every hallway. Doctors moved like ghosts, exhausted beyond measure. The smell of disinfectant and fear hung in the air. Dr. Yuna surveyed the scene and immediately began organizing. We need triage areas. Separate the critical cases. Jiho, take Team 3 to the East Wing. Alira, I need you to coordinate with local staff. They worked for days without stopping. Jiho treated patients with the same care he'd shown on New Jeju, never hesitating even when Velhari patients looked at him with suspicion. His steady hands and calm voice saved lives. Other doctors watched and learned from him. Alira moved between departments, translating medical terms, explaining human treatment protocols, and analyzing patient genetics. The pattern she'd discovered in her research held true. Patients with genetic variations, the ones the council would have considered flawed, survived at 3 times the rate of perfect specimens. On the 5th day, the matriarch council summoned her. Alira walked through the palace halls for the first time in 3 years. Everything looked the same. Crystal pillars reaching toward painted ceilings. But she saw it differently now. The perfection looked sterile rather than beautiful. Cold rather than impressive. The 12 matriarchs sat in their elevated seats, but several chairs were empty. The plague had reached even them. Matriarch Velnus looked older, frailer than Alira remembered. Princess Alira, Velnus said. The title felt strange after years of exile. Your research has been studied. The patterns you identified are accurate. Thank you, matriarch. The council wishes to know why you returned. We exiled you, declared you worthless. Your people rejected you. Velnus leaned forward. Why help us? Why help us? Alira took a breath. Because people are dying, children are orphaned, families are destroyed. I may disagree with council policies, but I don't want to see the empire fall. And because I learned something from humans that the empire never taught me. What is that? That worth doesn't come from perfection. It comes from choosing to act with compassion, even when you've been hurt. My husband taught me that. He married me when I was worthless by Velhari standards. And he showed me that love and choice matter more than duty and biology. The chamber was silent. Several matriarchs looked uncomfortable. One, younger than the others, nodded slowly. Your research suggests genetic diversity is necessary for survival, Velnus said finally. That our pursuit of perfection has made us vulnerable. Yes, the genetic variations you've eliminated, the ones you call flaws, they're actually our strength. They allow adaptation, resistance, survival in changing conditions. Alira stepped forward. The empire must change its policies. Accept genetic diversity. Stop forcing perfect matches. Allow people to choose their own partners, their own paths. That would undermine everything we've built. What you've built is dying. Alira gestured toward the windows, toward the city beyond. In the hospital right now, the survivors are overwhelmingly outcasts and mixed heritage individuals. The pure bloodlines are failing. If the empire doesn't adapt, there will be no empire left to preserve. Another long silence. Then Matriarch Velnus stood. The council will consider your recommendations. In the meantime, we thank you for your service. Your exile is ended. Your titles are restored, if you wish them. I don't want titles, Alira said. I want policy changes. I want the laws that define worth by fertility eliminated. I want mixed marriages recognized. I want adoption legalized. I want the empire to value people for who they are, not what they can produce. That is asking for a complete restructuring of our society. Yes. And if you don't do it, the plague will do it for you. But it will cost millions more lives. The human medical team worked for 3 months on the Velhari homeworld. Slowly, they turned the tide. The plague didn't disappear, but mortality rates dropped. Hospitals emptied. Life began returning to the crystal cities. Jiho became something of a legend among Velhari doctors. They had never seen a medical worker with his combination of skill and genuine compassion. He treated the council members with the same care he gave to servants. He held the hands of dying patients and spoke to them about Earth's gardens and hope. One elderly Velhari woman, recovering from the plague, asked him why he worked so hard for people who had treated his wife so badly. "Because she would want me to," Jiho said simply. "And because every life matters, even the ones who make mistakes." News of the human medical response spread across the empire. Artists created images of Jiho and his team working in overcrowded hospitals. Poets wrote verses about the human who had married the forsaken princess and returned to save her people. The story took on mythic qualities, but the real change happened quietly. In hospitals and homes across the empire, Velhari citizens saw humans, those supposedly primitive beings, risking their lives to save Velhari patients. They saw Jiho treating everyone with dignity. They saw Alira working alongside former enemies. Reform movements gained strength. Young Velhari started questioning the genetic purity laws. Parents of infertile children demanded change. The border worlds, which had mixed populations, began pushing for recognition of non-traditional families. 6 months after the plague began, the Matriarch Council announced reforms. The fertility laws were modified. Mixed marriages would be recognized. Adoption was legalized. It wasn't everything Alira had asked for, but it was a start. Change takes time, Matriarch Velnus told her in a private meeting. "We cannot transform overnight, but your research and your actions have shown us we must adapt or die." The council has chosen adaptation. "What about the people who are different?" Alira asked. "The ones who can't have children? Who don't fit the mold? They will have a place. Perhaps not immediately, perhaps not everywhere, but they will have a place." Velnus paused. "You have earned that for them, for yourself. Ah, flee stay. Ah, flee stay. Ah, flee stay. Ah, flee stay. Into the fleeced. Ah, flee stay." Jiho and Alira returned to New Jeju as heroes, though neither felt comfortable with that label. They just wanted to go home. The children met them at the spaceport. Hyun had grown taller. Sora ran forward and hugged Alira so hard it hurt. Doyun cried happy tears. Nari stood behind them, grinning. "Welcome home," Nari said. The kids have been counting the days. Their apartment felt smaller than Alira remembered, and infinitely precious. That night, they all squeezed onto the couch together, the 5 of them, and watched a movie about Earth's oceans that the children loved. Doyun fell asleep against Alira's shoulder. Sora leaned on Jiho's other side. Hyun sat on the floor, his head resting against Jiho's knee. It was uncomfortable, and cramped, and perfect. "I missed this," Alira whispered to Jiho. "Me too. I was thinking we should get a bigger place. The children are growing. A house, maybe, with a garden. I could teach them to grow vegetables like my grandmother taught me. They'd like that." Alira looked around their small home, at the peace lily that now took up an entire corner, at the children's drawings covering the walls, at the life they'd built from rejection and exile. "We made something good here, didn't we? We made something great." Jiho kissed her forehead. "And we're just getting started." 5 years later, their house on the edge of the colony had a large garden where vegetables grew in neat rows. Hyun was studying medicine, wanting to be like Jiho. Sora was learning 6 languages and wanted to be a diplomat like her aunt Nari. Doyun was teaching younger children at Alira's school, patient and kind. The Velhari Empire continued its slow transformation. Mixed marriages became common on the border worlds and slowly spread inward. Alira's research was required reading in every medical school. The story of the infertile princess and the human soldier who loved her became a tale told to children across 2 civilizations. But in their garden on New Jeju, away from politics and legends, Jiho and Alira were simply themselves. A family built on choice and love, and the radical belief that every person had worth. They had proved that worth wasn't measured in bloodlines or perfect genes. It was measured in courage and compassion, and the choice to stand with someone when the universe said you shouldn't. And in the end, that was the most human thing of all.